learn like deeply about World War II or these kind of like wars, it was when I was in the United States. So in that sense, I'm not sure to what extent the younger generation actually know about the history. I mean, maybe like Professor Wang Wu said, I'm the younger generation who doesn't know much about history. But I think that's the kind of one problem. The reason why we didn't actually come to the term within like Japan domestically. So that's the kind of one thing. And then I think like we have to actually talk about it and discuss about it internally, and then we have to actually at least we have to acknowledge what actually happened. Like in so.
In your opinion, you think Japan should acknowledge the history and
we first actually like we need to discuss about it. So one more. Sorry, can I? One more example is the Yasukuni Shrine. Yasukuni Shrine is really complicated. So it's not the kind of the shrine that Japanese government kind of honored the class A war criminals. So it's more like they have like really complicated history. And even those who support the Yasukuni Shrine don't know much about what Yasukuni Shrine is. So in that sense, like there was many confusions within the Japanese, among the Japanese. So like at first, like we have to know what was going on, and then like discuss about it. I think like this is the more kind of domestic process, like we need to take at first.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gungwu, please.
That's a very good question about the United States and Japan. The story is actually a very long one, but I try to reduce it to this simple, and I tell you straight away, it's oversimple. But the most important factor was that at the end of the war, while the United States was the victor and Japan was helpless and actually occupied by the Japanese.
By the Americans.
By the Americans. The Americans had to think very seriously what they wanted to do with the emperor and the Japanese people. They didn't want to make permanent enemies of the Japanese, so they made certain decisions. But most of all, they looked ahead to the fact that China was going to become communist. So we come to the Cold War. And in the course of the Cold War, what the Americans could not tolerate was that the left wing or the communists in Japan should also win in Japan. So it was an American interest to support the right-wingers, or at least the non-communists in Japan, to make sure that the Japanese Communist Party did not become more powerful. Because at that point, the Japanese Communist Party was still very influential. And the model of victories in China and so on could have inspired them to do more in Japan. So I think these were factors, the ideological factor, the fact that China became communist as on the side of the Soviet Union in the Cold War. It enhanced the American desire to have a whole group of people as allies, hence the Japan-U.S. alliance in the Cold War against the enemy. And the enemy was China and the Soviet Union. So that was set as early as the 1950s. So having said that, for such a long time, you can see the alliance of interests had grown ever since then. Whereas China remained, of course, the China of the Communist Party. Even though they're not particularly communist, nevertheless, it is the Communist Party. Still, the echo, the shadow of the Cold War remains. And whether we like it or not, that remains a major divide in how people perceive the future. So in that context, the Japan-U.S. alliance will continue to have an ideological element in that. When Americans talk about the democracies unite against the authoritarian states, the U.S.-Japan alliance would fall in very nicely into that framework. So there are many other examples I can give, but underlying it all was an alliance that is historically rooted in the post-war victory of the communists on the mainland, and the war in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, the whole Cold War. And when the Cold War ended, the United States was all powerful anyway. So there was no need to change. And now that they're coming back with China rising and America uncertain whether China will become friendly or not, or cannot trust the Chinese to be truly friendly, then the need for Japan or Japan's need for America, mutual need of the two countries, is even more obvious than ever. So I would say that will mean that the alliance will continue.
Yeah. But I want to also tell you that American memories of the Second World War have not been forgotten. So when Prime Minister Abe recently visited the Yasukuni Shrine, the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo issued a statement expressing American disappointment with his visit. I also want to tell you that a few years ago, when I helped organize a conference in Hiroshima, and the conference participants included Americans, Europeans, and so on. And when we attended a peace memorial at the Hiroshima Shrine, and the mayor of Hiroshima spoke very eloquently against nuclear weapons and asked us to remember the innocent victims of the atomic bomb. Unfortunately, I had to reply, And my American friends were very uncomfortable with this partial narrative, because they told me that in my reply, I should remind the Japanese that there was a history before the bomb. The reason why the American bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki was that the Japanese had been the aggressor against the American, and that they had fought many battles in the Pacific. But being a polite Singaporean, I didn't say that. I kept it in my heart. But one day I will tell my friends in Hiroshima that it is not right for them to start their narrative with the dropping of the bomb, because there was a history before the bomb, But anyway, third question, the PLA, will it always be under the party?
I think you mentioned that post-Tiananmen that the PLA has played a bigger role, and the Chinese government used the PLA to justify its rule. Well, that's not entirely true, because post-Tiananmen, what really has kept the Chinese government in power has been its performance. It's done very well as a government, being able to grow its economy tremendously, and China has developed so much in the last 25 years or so. Having said that, if you look at PLA as history, it has never been the case of where the military in China, at least under the Chinese Communist Party, where there's a history of military coups, of the army coming out and usurping power, like what we have seen in Thailand, in Egypt, and maybe even in Pakistan. That has never happened with the CCP. So the CCP has maintained a very close control of the PLA, and pretty successful at that. Your follow-up point about newer leaders not having military experience, that's definitely true. We saw that with Jiang Zemin, with Hu Jintao, and now with Xi Jinping. They have never really served in the PLA or fought along with the soldiers the way that Mao and Deng did. But Xi has a little bit of a military experience, having served as a secretary to the Minister of Defense in the late 1970s. That little bit of experience has given him a leg up compared to his predecessors. But definitely, there is the sense that the party needs to be better controlled. Mind you, the PLA is a party army and not a national army, unlike, say, the Singapore Armed Forces. They report to the Chinese Communist Party rather than to the state itself. So there has been a lot of talk in China, especially in recent years, of the nationalization of the PLA. But the recognition that there is a need to control the military title, I think we saw that a few months ago with the third plenum, when Xi announced this whole National Security Commission. So this whole new body, this whole new apparatus is really about bringing power closer and ensuring that it remains in the hands of civilians, especially under his control, and ensuring that there's no misfire or the military doing something, whether it's in Gungwu or in the South China Sea, that they may spark an unwanted war.
Thank you. Greg, it is 9 o'clock, but there are still four students waiting to ask questions. Should I just hear all their questions and then have one final round? Okay. Can you keep your question short, please?
Hi,